Hi there and welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me. So today we are going to be making a lovely decoration for Christmas. This is just made from some simple fabric which has got a nice clear pattern on it, clear design, so that you can use some free motion embroidery. All you will need is some fabric of your choice, some felt for the back. This is a 6-inch wooden hoop, a piece of ribbon and some wadding to go underneath. So your free motion quilting will really pop and make that design really lovely and clear and nice and quilted. So let's get sewing. Okay, so here we are at the machine. So this is what I'm going to make, which I've just shown you before. So I'm going to put that to the side. And this is the material that I've got prepared for the project I'm doing today. So this is just from a 10-inch charm pack, which I have got from Moda, which is just lovely. Doesn't really matter which choice of fabric you make, as long as it's got a nice clear design on it, I would say, so that you've got something you can do your free motion embroidery around and to make that design pop. And it wants to be the right kind of size to fit in your hoop. Now this is, let me just double check, a 6-inch hoop, 6-inch wooden hoop. Now I have already placed my wadding on the back, which I will talk through and show you in a second, because I wanted it to be, you're sort of footy cutting if you like, because you wouldn't want your hoop to be, well, it depends how you want it. I wouldn't want my hoop to be where the pattern of the fabric is along, off the edge of the hoop. So I have selected this pair of snowmen, so that's where I want it. So I've got an idea of where I'm going to position my hoop when it's finished. So what I've already done there, which you can do, is I have taken my hoop, made sure that it's the right size for my design. I have drawn a circle and made a template out of paper and have cut out my wadding. Now I like Vlieseline H640 for this, so that's what I have used, a fusible fleece that you can easily iron on, fuse it on just with your heat. Now I'm looking for some paper. So to make my circle, you could do that a couple of ways. You could get your piece of paper. This is just an A4, simple A4 piece of paper. I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm going to fold it in half again to quarter it. And you could use a pen to then draw your, so my hoop is 6 inches, so I'm just using my sewing machine guide. So mark 3 inches on your paper here, and then I'm going to use my hoop to draw that circle. Or of course, I shouldn't really be doing this on the sewing machine, or of course you could just draw around the hoop directly. So I'm using my non-fabric scissors, and I'm going to draw around, cut around that shape, and then that gives you your circle for your template. So you could then draw around that on your H640 or your choice of wadding, and that gives you your shape, or just draw around that on your wadding, and then fuse that to your fabric by making sure that you've got your hoop lined up, as we mentioned earlier, where you want that on the fabric, which piece of the fabric you want to show, and fuse that onto the back with your iron. So I've already done that, and I'm going to show you how to change the presser foot on your machine. So I'm going to take it from a standard foot, and I'm going to use my walking foot. This is the one I got with my machine. Yours will be something similar. So I'm going to take the screwdriver, and I'm going to release the whole of the foot. I call it the little ankle joint, and the foot itself. So you've got the foot which releases off, and this little ankle joint here. So the whole thing is removed. Now this feels a bit scary sometimes. It isn't at all, because you kind of look at your machine now and think, oh, that looks really bare, but actually that's exactly what you want it to be. So you can put this walking foot on, and what that means is that it allows you to have that free motion with your machine. So you're a bit more in charge. You're going to put the feed dogs down, and you're also going to then have the freedom to stitch in any way that you want, any direction. So I'm just going to cut that thread off because it's quite long. Doesn't need to be particularly long. Make sure it's to the back. It will sort itself out, that thread. I've just got white thread in the top and in my bobbin thread. I've got my stitch set to on just a normal straight stitch. I'm going to lower my feed dogs, which on my machine is just this button here, however you do that on yours, and I'm keeping the stitch length, or taking the stitch length down to 0, so that then gives me absolute control over where I'm stitching. Just let me have a little bit of tea, because I need a bit of tea to keep me going. It's what you do, isn't it? So, cup of tea, happy days. So I'm going to start, you can start anywhere, there's no rules for free motion. I'm going to start in a place that's least obvious, let's say. So I'm going to start at the edge, because I'm going to applique, it's like applique, that's why a bit of a slip there, because it is like applique, except I haven't glued these on, they're already on the fabric, so it's cutting out a step. So I'm going to free motion around the edge of the snowman, all around his upper body, all around the bottom of his body. I might go around his buttons, I'm going to go around his scarf, and I'm going to do the same with his little buddy here. So I'm going to start on the corner here near his scarf, just so that I've got an automatic lever for my foot, so that's me putting the foot down. I'm just going to start in this corner here by this larger snowman's scarf. So I've got my wadding underneath, so it's going to quilt nice and firmly, so it's going to give you that real pop of texture when you've finished. So I'm going to start free motioning, and this is a bit like drawing with your machine. I absolutely love it. And you can see I'm just going to stop with my needle down and cut that loose thread, because that loose thread, if you can see it there, is just going to get in the way. It's not hurting anything, it just gets in the way, so I'm just going to cut it off. So you can see I'm not rushing, I'm just taking my time. I have a general kind of, there's that thread, I'm going to take the end of it off there. I have a kind of rule, if you like, when I'm free motioning, that I will go around each item, each area 3 times, because that gives it a real nice, like, sketchy look, and that's how I like my free motion to be. Because the thread is white and the snowman is white, you can't see the thread that clearly, you know, that it doesn't stand out, and that's how I want it to be, but you will see it in the texture when you're finished. So I'm going to carry on going around that scarf. That's the 3rd time round, and when I get back to this point, there's no point or no need to lift your foot, tie off your thread and start again. With free motion, you just keep going. So I'm going to keep my needle down, and I'm just now going around this other bit of the scarf 3 times. So I'm never, until I've finished, I'm not going to stop sewing or release the needle from the work. I'm going to do the tassels on the scarf. Now I didn't do that on the first bit, so I'm going to go back down this edge and do the tassels on the first bit of the scarf. Back round. So that's the scarf now done. I'm now going to go around his head. I'm going to chop over his nose because you won't notice that. And you can see I'm going to go around again 3 times. Now when I'm free motioning, I like to have a row of stitches which is on the actual item itself that I'm going around. One that's sort of slightly off the edge and one that's in the middle, so that it gives it that nice sketchy look. I'm going to go around the edge of his head, back down to his scarf. And again, you can stop, you're in complete control. So free motion can perhaps feel like you're a bit out of control of your machine. You're actually not at all, you're always in control. And in some ways you're more in control because the feed dogs are down, so you're controlling it. You know, you've not got the machine pushing the fabric forward. Let's have another bit of tea. And then we're going to carry on with his upper body. So I'm going to go around his body. Now another thing that's a bit of a tip here, I'm going quite fast here, What I'm going to do on my machine, I can alter the speed here from tortoise to hare. So I always go sort of flat out. I'm going to reduce it a little to about 3/4, so that when I have got my foot flat to the floor on the pedal, it's not going to run away with me too much. And that way it just makes it a little more steady, which makes you feel, again, just that bit more in control. Go around that upper body 3 times. And again, I'm going to come back down and I'm going to stop there. I'm not going to cut my thread off. I'm just going to stop at the next point where I'm going to go round 3 times. Starting again. Go round his bottom of his body here, and it doesn't matter if you're going off the edge, because that's kind of what you want to do. You want to see the stitches. You're not hiding it. It wants to have that sketchy look. Well, that's how I like to do my free motion. So I'm going to go back round here, and then I'm going to go back along that smaller line there, and then back down here. So I'm not releasing my needle at all from the work, because I'm going across to this left hand side with this smaller little snowman here. And then I'm going to start again with his body, going around the edge, moving your fabric just gently with your fingers. I'm not wearing the quilting gloves. Sometimes I use those. They can be useful because they help you to grip onto the fabric. I don't need them today. So around the edge of that body, stop again when I get to the next part, and then I'm going to put my foot down again and go around his head, over the nose, because you won't see those stitches going over. And there we go. And this time, just deciding whether to go down around the buttons. Don't think I'm going to, so I'm going to cut my thread off. And there we've got your beautifully free motioned snowmen on the piece that's going to go into your hoop. So I'm going to take my hoop here and release this little screw at the top, because that just gives it that room to, it releases it from the inner hoop. A bit more. I love these old wooden hoops, they're just so nice. When I'm actually doing embroidery, I prefer the rubber hoops. I find those are tighter, to hold your work a bit tighter. But I love these for using them as frames. They're really nice. So I'm going to put my smaller hoop at the back. So I have, let me just move the machine out of the way. So I'm going to put my smaller hoop at the back, and I'm going to place my fabric on top of that hoop. Remember, I've got the wadding already underneath the fabric, so I can feel where that's lined up to. I'm then going to place that hoop over the top of the smaller hoop, and it's now going to pinch the fabric in place with the wadding behind it, so it's nice and tight. Now at that point it's not overly tight. I'm just going to check the back to make sure that I've got the shape really nice and snug, and it's not overly tight here, so I'm going to start tightening that up. And I'm just going to pause there and just tighten up, just pull my fabric ever so gently, because it wants to be like a drum. So I'm just going to pull it ever so gently. You don't have to be tight or, you know, really tense pulling it to stretch the fabric, because you don't want it to warp or anything at this stage. You just want it to be nice and even. So I'm just going round. I'm happy with the placement of my snowman in the centre. So I'm going to carry on holding that screw and just tightening that up, and that is as tight as I'm going to take it. I'm happy with that. So I'm going to take my pinking shears, now that fabric's nice and firm, and I'm going to cut around the edge of the fabric about an inch. I'm not being too precise here, as you can see, but it's about an inch. All you need is enough to make sure that you can use your needle and your thread to do a running stitch around this edge. Now you can see here I've only got about ½ an inch spare seam allowance, but that's okay, because that's just how it was. That's where the pattern was, that was close to that edge of the fabric, so that's okay, it's no problem. No one's going to see this. I'm just leaving enough of an edge for me to be able to do a running stitch round to gather it up so I can make it nice and tidy. Using a hand needle, I'm going to get some cotton. Now the cotton's all tangled up on my sewing table, so I'm going to take a nice white. Again, it doesn't matter overly, but I am going to use plenty of thread because I'm going to double it. I'm going to double that thread over. That way, the reason I'm going to double it over is if one of them snaps, because it's a bit like when you're doing a gathering stitch for making a ruffle on an item, if when you're pulling it a little bit tighter, if you need to, then if one of the edges snaps when you're pulling, you've got another one to fall back on. So put a knot in the end of my thread. I'm going to start anywhere on that circle. You don't have to start at the top, you don't have to start at the bottom. So I'm just going to start randomly here, about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric, doing about 1/4 of an inch stitch, running stitch. So I'm just taking my needle, I do 2 at a time, and I'm going to go in with my thread, with my needle, and back out. And I'm going to do a couple of those stitches at a time so that I'm keeping my needle in, and just pull. Now don't pull that too tight, because if you start pulling tight, you can see it's beginning to gather already, which is great, that's what you want it to do, but you don't need to worry about that yet. So I'm going to go in with my needle, out, in, out, pull it through, and I'm going to do that all the way around. Just going to bring the machine forward so I can rest on that a little bit and you can see more clearly. So in and out all the way around, and I just think these decorations, when you make them, especially if you're making them as a gift for someone, you could embroider something, you could personalize it, couldn't you? You could personalize a message on the front, you could put someone's name, you could use your friction pen and write on the front of it Merry Christmas and the person's name if you wanted to, and it really gives them a personalised Christmas message, which I just think is so lovely. And you've done it yourself, you know. It's nice to buy sort of shop bought decorations, isn't it? But I just enjoy making on my own. Of course, it's having the time to do it, but that's important as well. I'm also a counsellor. I have my own counselling practice and work with people all the time about, you know, being mindful, being relaxed, doing something in your life that helps you feel, takes your mind off things, you know, helps you feel relaxed and calm. And for me, that has always been crafting, sewing, crochet, embroidery, knitting, card making, you know, whatever it is, I'll have a go at it, and always did as a young girl, always in my bedroom, making everything that they, every week then the other projects on Blue Peter, you know, I'd be saving, washing up bottles and inside of loo rolls and stuff, making something, because I've always found that it's a nice escape for me, the crafting, and I think a lot of people find that, and you time is massively important, don't underestimate that. So if that's your thing, then enjoy. So you can see I've gone all the way around back to the beginning, and I'm just gently pulling, it almost pulls itself around. So I'm just going to gently pull the thread, make sure it's sort of evenly spaced on the back. Not that anyone's going to see this, so it doesn't overly matter, but you're just pulling the stitches, and you can see that from the front then it's nice and flat, and you've got a nice even edge around the back. So I'm going to tack in that stitch to secure, and again, and weave in my ends and just snip that off. And now we're going to get the piece of felt and secure that onto the back with some fabric glue. So here's our design, and I'm now going to use my friction pen to draw around the edge of the hoop onto the felt, which is going to be the back. So I'm just going to mark all around. Now remember that this is going to be the larger edge, you know, the very larger edge of that circle. So there's my circle marked on the felt, and I'm now going to use pinking shears again. You don't have to, I just like the design that it gives. So I'm going to cut around that circle. Gently going around. It's a real nice feeling to cut the felt because it's nice and thick and plush. Go around the edge, and I'm going to take my glue, which is just the Gutterman HT2, is it? And I'm just going to check that that is the right size. So I'm going to do it on the front first of all, just so I can get an idea. And then when I turn that over, I'm just going to see, because that seems a little, so this bit reminds me of putting a lid on a mince pie, you know, when you make your own mince pies. So it's a little bit big because, as I mentioned a minute ago, when I drew around the circle, I drew around the edge, you know, the outer edge, so it's a bit big. So to make it a bit smaller, I'm going to fold it in half again, so I've got a quarter of a circle, and I'm just going to take about 1/8 of an inch off the edge of that quarter circle around there. There's lots of fluffy bits, and just check that again, and that's perfect. So just use your actual hoop as a guide because you want it to not be seen from the front. Before I secure that in place with my glue, I'm going to take my ribbon. So I've got a nice green which matches the colour of the fabric, and I like quite a large hanging hoop on this so that I can put it wherever I want. So if I want to make it a bit shorter, I can, but you can't make a bit, if it's short to start with, you can't make it longer if you need it to be. So I'm going to be quite generous with this hoop, with this ribbon. So I'm going to fold it in half. I'm going to bring it through both of those pieces through the front, weave them through, and I'm going to take the ribbon as a loop and pull it through that loop, so it creates a nice front, a nice little, it reminds me of a tie, a gentleman's tie, a nice like Windsor knot, and it also just covers up a little bit of the of that fastening there. I'm now going to make a bow so that it's nice and festive, so I'm going to do a bow. Now when I do a bow, if I'm just doing up my shoes or something, I'll always go forward, but to make a bow where you want it to be more decorative, I find that if you take the ribbon from the back and over, especially if you've got double-sided or single-sided, should I say, ribbon, because this is double-sided, so it doesn't matter if it loops round and you see the reverse, but if you've got single-sided ribbon, you obviously want the most decorative edge facing you. So I'm going to take the loop, take the ribbon around the front and take it back through that loop there, and that, I'm all fingers and thumbs here, take it back round, and as I loop it through, you have a little bit more control. And what I find when you do it in that direction, it sits a little bit flatter, always sits a little bit, so it's facing you a bit nicer. I'm going to just mess around here, bringing that bottom of that ribbon out, because I want it to be nice. You don't want it to look, you know, like it's just been thrown together. So play around with it, because you don't have sort of time limits, and it's not like tying your shoes, is it, where you're rushing about. So take your time to make that ribbon look really, oh sorry, you can't see me, faffing around a little bit, look, making it look really nice and flat and even. And then I'm going to take the ribbon at the back, take it up so it's away from that ribbon at the front, and then I'm going to just tie another ribbon here that it will then fasten onto whatever I want it to be on. So I've got 2 nice ribbons to hang it. So turn it back over now, make sure that ribbon is out of the way, and I'm just gonna, the only thing left to do is secure this felt onto the back. So I'm going to take my glue, now this is really strong glue, so be careful, and I'm going to go all around the edge of my fabric here. Don't need to go onto the wooden edge of your hoop, just going all the way around the fabric nice and evenly. You can be quite generous, although like I say, it's quite strong. Obviously you can, whatever fabric glue you've got to hand, and pop that to one side. Make sure you put the lid back on because it dries out quickly. And then I'm going to take my felt circle and I'm going to place it on top of the fabric on the hoop. And like I say, if you make mince pies, you'll know exactly what I mean, or any sort of pie. It's like putting the lid on it. And I'm just going to press that in gently so that it's secured and attached to that fabric at the back. And that is my Christmas decoration made. So obviously that glue just needs some time to dry. So I will hang that because I can and wait for the glue to dry on the fabric on the back. Just going to quickly adjust that. Look, it's just come away from that edge. So you've got a few minutes to just adjust it, pull it to where you want it. And because I've used fabric glue, so I suppose you could use glue that would help you to stick it onto the wooden edge of the hoop. But this is doing the job absolutely beautifully. So just make sure it's nice and secure whilst it's not 100% set. You've got a little bit of play in it. And there you are. Perfect. And there is your finished snowman hoop. Nicely decorated with some coordinating ribbon. It's been nicely free motion, so you've got a nice decorative effect on your fabric, and it's all ready to hang on your door with all your other Christmas decorations. So I hope you enjoy making yours. Please like and subscribe to my channel. It's absolutely free to subscribe, but it just means I can provide you with more content. And also, if you click the bell, then you get notifications of when I do more videos coming up soon. So thanks for joining me today, and see you again soon. Enjoy your sewing.